Looking to make some healthier habits this holiday season? Make sure to check out our Moving Through Midlife community over on Facebook, as we are doing a Planksgiving event where we are doing daily plank workouts. We will be doing an Advent for healthy, happy hips this holiday season, and then also have a sugar challenge, a 2-week sugar challenge that you might be interested in. Happy holidays!
Welcome to Raising Healthy Humans, a podcast created for busy moms, where you can easily find info on health and wellness for your family. Join Courtney, a health coach, movement and posture specialist, and founder of FormFit, an active and supportive community where she helps busy moms move more. Here on Raising Healthy Humans podcast, she shares personal life experiences, training, knowledge, and conversations with other health and wellness experts so you can raise healthy humans.
Today, I am speaking with Kara, a mom and life coach that helps moms find clarity around their purpose in life as they enter middle motherhood. We had a great conversation about how taking time to go within and really listen to your heart, you can begin to take action towards God's purpose for you. So if you are a mom asking yourself what's next or questioning the path you are currently on, this conversation is for you. Hi, Kara. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Courtney?
I am great. I'm excited to have you on because you are dealing with that time in life with moms where they're in that middle stage. But I love how you call it middle motherhood, because that is, I've been speaking with a friend of mine who we are both in this middle life, and we're like, we don't like calling it midlife, and she was calling it seasoned mom, but that didn't seem to resonate. So I really love the middle motherhood. I think that's a great way of putting it. Can you tell me about yourself and your passion with middle motherhood?
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. I just want to say I love the name of your podcast, Raising Healthy Humans. Like, I think and the angle that you take on it, like focusing on moms, right? It all starts with us. And that's really kind of where the passion for middle motherhood has come from. So I'm not sure if you know this, but I'm actually a dietitian by trade. Went to school to be a dietitian. And I specialize in intuitive eating. And that was really my first kind of journey into what I do now as a mindset and life coach. Intuitive eating was really kind of that first look into our brains and how our mind impacts so much of our life, especially around food,
right? And
our relationship with food and our relationship with our body. And so that was really the first thing that kind of sparked this interest into digging deeper into the mindset piece of it. It was really that first kind of like, I don't want to say point of attack, but for myself personally and the women that I worked with from a nutrition standpoint, focusing on the mind and our thoughts and our feelings and our relationship with food and body had the greatest impact like I've really ever seen as a dietitian. And like parallel to that, I was working with a coach, specifically a business coach, and she started to incorporate a lot of mindset work. And while, I had moved past the mindset piece with food and body image, I was struggling with mindset around growing a business. It wasn't anything I'd ever done before. And really that mindset piece allowed me to really dig deep into all these limiting beliefs that I had. And really it was these thoughts and, ultimately these lies were like this plague, and it just infected so much of my life. And when I started to get some clarity just around, these beliefs that I had and really starting to challenge these thoughts, I felt this kind of tug on my heart, and I can only attribute it to God and those little desires, those little nudges that we feel. And I fought him on it. I will tell you, I fought him tooth and nail on it. I'd spent all last summer saying, nope, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to pivot. Like, I went to school to be a dietitian. I got to use that degree. Like, that's what I have to do. And all along, I just kept hearing him say, like, you need to help these moms. You need to help these moms, because I was a stay-at-home mom for several years.
Mm-hmm.
And my youngest started kindergarten this last year. And I kind of remember the pivotal point. I was at his transitional kindergarten field trip, and I was standing around talking to these group of moms, and everyone was like, well, what are you going to do with all your free time now that all your kids are in school? And, at the time I had a business, but there were other women who were in the same boat where they were entering into this phase of middle motherhood. And I'd hear things like, well, I don't know, or I'll get caught up on, the housework, or I'll organize this, or I'll finally do my baby books. And then there was one woman, and I remember in particular, she's like, well, I guess I'm going to go back to an accounting job. I don't even know if I like accounting anymore, but I kind of feel this pressure that since the kids are in school, I need to earn money. Like, I kind of feel this pressure from my husband. And just the more I thought about it, the more I leaned into God telling me, like, Kara, you have some gifts, you have some tools to help these moms through this transition, to start to answer some of these questions of, who am I? What do I do now? How do I want to spend my days? As moms, like, our kids are a lot of times our whole life. Mm-hmm. And it's not to say that that's wrong or bad, but at some point they grow up and they leave the home. And this is why you hear all these empty nesters who kind of go through this identity crisis. Mm-hmm. And I really think the first phase starts with this middle motherhood, when all your kids are in school and you're like, I don't know what to do. And yeah, sure, maybe you catch up on organizing things. I still have yet to even open my third child's baby book and start that. It will probably stay in the box forever. Poor Ryan. But I quickly realized, like, the laundry wasn't fulfilling. Like, if your kids aren't home all day, your house pretty much stays clean. So there's not like needing to clean it all the time. And yeah, I just felt like there was this calling to really help moms through this transition of middle motherhood.
Okay. Well, and you've touched on quite a few things in there that I'd love to kind of dig into deeper. Because this was me, very similar. I owned a business, but it was stroller fitness, and my children had all gotten to the point where they were out of strollers. And I kept my daughter up until she was in elementary school. So I continued. And then I kind of got to the point where I was like, I don't know if this is what I want to do anymore. 7 years later, I'm back in it. But I think it was that it's almost like, I don't want to say midlife crisis, but it almost feels like that, where you're like, now what? Like, my purpose was raising my children, and I had coincided my fitness business, because it was stroller fitness, with raising my children. Like, that was what I was going to do in tandem. And then once they were no longer with me, it was like, oh, who am I now? Mm-hmm. That's a very hard thing. Can you, like, thinking about that, not my situation specifically, but when moms think to themselves, who am I now? What do you recommend is like that first step to help moms kind of figure out what they're going to do? Like, what do you recommend?
Yeah, I want to I have a recommendation, but it's almost like a backwards recommendation of maybe like what we tend to do and why it doesn't work and what to do instead. But we start to ask the question of, what now? Who am I? And the first thing we do, and this is with every part of our life, we look to someone else, right? Mm-hmm. We scroll the internet looking for a solution to answer these questions. And oftentimes we can find an answer. We can find a solution. We can, do someone else's program, or, someone will say, do this and you will be happy. Because I think that's really the root of it, is we these questions come up and we feel this discontent, like we feel uncomfortable and we just want to feel better. And so we have the tendency to look for those kind of like quick, satisfying things that make us feel better, but it's all external. We look to the world around us, and while that may offer us some like temporary reprieve, and like we can try some of these things and maybe we feel better, it still doesn't get into like that heart of the authenticity of who we ourselves are and who we were created to be. I think a big thing to remember is that like God doesn't want carbon copies of us. Like we don't need more of the same person. We were all given these unique gifts and these unique talents. So I think that's a really good place to start, is to kind of reflect on what are some things that you enjoy doing? Like what are some of these kind of like natural gifts and abilities that you have? And a good place to start is you can ask your friends, you can ask your family, like, what are these things that you're seeing in me? Because oftentimes we don't see them in ourselves. And so really starting to tap into what your interests are. I think we feel a lot of pressure to go back to whatever our degree was in, or, whatever we had training in. And we're not the same people that we were before we had kids. And oftentimes if we're going to pursue something, and it doesn't even have to be, something that produces an income, even volunteering wise, we don't have the same interests. We don't have the same like perspective and view on the world. And so really, I think digging into understanding like what makes you tick, like what sets your soul on fire? What are your interests? What are problems that maybe you would want to solve, or, a community or a population that you would want to serve? And I think that's a really good place to start. Instead of looking like to everybody else to solve this problem, kind of go inwards. And it can be challenging, but that's really where that mindset piece and like that coaching comes in, is it's being able to kind of see how your mind works and really uncover, I call it mind drama a lot, but we tend to get stuck in our heads. There's a lot of noise, constant noise that just funnels through our head all day long. And so if you can't filter through that mind drama, it makes it very challenging to even know where to start, like to have a sense of direction.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned thinking about things we enjoy. And I always think about like one thing that I enjoy, but I don't know, like, how do you keep that for people to where it might be like a hobby of theirs, but when your hobby turns into your work, you may not have the same enjoyment with it. So are there things that you usually recommend for moms in the way of finding that through line? I know you mentioned like asking family members or friends as well. What do you think about like turning your hobby into a job?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So what I find is interesting is that as a coach, I don't have the answers. All the answers are within each person. Okay. And so my role as a coach is to kind of help you filter through all of that and pull these answers out from within you. And really taking it and relying on God and making him a part of that equation. Okay. We do a lot of like goal setting with God and kind of that discernment process. Like a big piece is like creating this vision of what we would want our life to look like going forward. How are we spending our days? What things are we doing? And then it's like we have this vision, this kind of roadmap, and we're driving the car, but the whole time God's our GPS to kind of point us in that direction. Like maybe we take a wrong turn and then he can kind of fix that for us. Okay. And so as far as like hobby into a career, it's a really individual thing, right? Some people will not enjoy turning their hobby into a career, right? It's very much, you can kind of think about it in these different buckets of we have like our work, and that can be, things at home, being a mom, our volunteer opportunities or a career. And then we can have the personal piece. So I think some people will never turn their hobbies into a career, and that's okay. But maybe that's a volunteer opportunity, or maybe that's what they do in order to kind of fuel themselves for this particular career. Like, okay. I hope that makes sense. I feel like when we think about this, like we deplete a lot and then have to like pause and refill. It's like that empty cup. And so having those hobbies are a good way to kind of replenish that cup. And I say that just because I've been struggling with that lately, just within my own business, of feeling, discouraged. And what I realized was that I had gone into this all or nothing mindset of I have to spend every waking minute that my kids are in school working on growing this business. And by consequence, I wasn't doing other things that I enjoyed, like going to a yoga class or going to Bible studies or having lunch with friends, because in my head, I was telling myself, I can't do that. I will never have a successful business if I incorporate these things. But by not incorporating the hobbies, I wasn't fueling myself for the business piece. And it was leading to discouragement and frustration and resentment and kind of all those things. So it's like really looking at it from that whole person perspective. So even if your hobby does become a career or a passion that you pursue, what are the other things that you're doing to make sure, like, because we can go down the all or nothing pretty quickly.
Right. Well, and I want to mention something just because I find it interesting what you said kind of was in line with something I was reading yesterday. I purchased a book from someone who does a lot of Bible study, and she was mentioning how doing the mundane things while raising your children may not seem to be what your purpose is in life at that time. But being with God doesn't mean you have to actively be moving forward with your purpose. Sometimes being with God is just being with God, and changing those diapers or doing those things might be that portion of it. So I wanted to mention that. The other thing I wanted to ask you is you mentioned like sitting down and allowing God to speak to you. I am, like you mentioned, you're kind of at a crossroads type thing. I feel a pull to a few different things, and I think that I would enjoy any one of these things. How do you let God speak to you? I mean, I feel like sometimes, like you had mentioned, you had this direction from him. He spoke to you and mentioned like you need to go in this direction. How do you, one, know it's him speaking to you? Because I've had a few of these different things and I'm like, oh, this would be great. But then I get nervous, and then I'm like, you have like a few things. What about that person who's the squirrel, like myself, and is getting these different downloads, so to speak? How do you know like what to listen to and what to let go of?
So I mean, that's a really good question. I will say that when I was stuck in a lot of mind drama and like a lot of the swirling thoughts, especially when struggling with food and body image, I would hear people say, well, the Holy Spirit spoke to me. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't happen to me. What am I doing? What am I doing wrong? Right? Like, why am I not hearing this? And a big part of it was all the noise in my head. So I think having the tools and being able to filter those different thoughts and those different beliefs, like when you feel that fear, like as a coach, I help you see the trajectory. If you continue to think this, how does that play out in life?
Okay.
Like, is that leading you closer to God? Is that leading you towards sin? It varies as far as like what that trajectory does. Does it lead you to more service? Does it lead you to a greater good? Is it interfering with, other areas of your life that are important that you're being called to, like mom and raising your kids? Or does it complement that? Does it allow you to serve in a different way that you can be a better mom? So it's really capturing some of those thoughts and playing them out. Like, if we continue to think this is how that's going to impact your life. So managing the mind drama is huge. When I started to do that, I felt a lot more clarity and a lot more peace and a lot more calm, that I could start to listen to, like you said, these different downloads, right? These different thoughts that would come into my mind. And I really relied a lot on my emotions, like how it felt in my body, right? Okay. Like when I thought about this call to navigating middle motherhood with moms, it was very fearful, but it kept coming back. And sometimes that's a really big clue. When it continues to be something that's like a pull and a tug on your heart, it's those little nudges. That's him speaking to you, or at least that's the way it was for me. Now, again, everybody has that different connection. I know a lot of people who they'll get just different, like they can see things in pictures and images. I get a lot of clarity by writing things out, like just having conversations and writing out my thoughts and playing it out, and like just basically writing out a conversation is how I feel a lot of clarity. But I think our emotions play a lot into that as well. Like knowing that our emotions have a physical manifestation. And while there may be some fear, like what is the tone of that fear? Right? Is it like this flight or fight where you know it's bad? Or is it more of a nervousness where it's like, I'm excited about this, but I am nervous? And a lot of the clarity comes with taking action. And I think that can be a downside to moms and middle motherhood, is that we think whatever we do next has to be the forever thing, instead of looking at this phase as an opportunity to explore like different opportunities and different adventures, and like just kind of thinking about like, okay, if I try this, like giving yourself permission to just try an experiment, and like, okay, if that didn't work, it didn't fail. You just now learned a skill that, in a way to know that that's not what you were meant to do, or you're not supposed to do it this way. And so I think that's where the difference between like doing coaching within like faith-based and God-centered versus secular coaching is, failure has a very different perspective. It becomes more the learning process instead of like a hard, well, that didn't work, I'm going to walk away from it. You're not alone in it. And it takes a lot of pressure off of yourself.
Well, and I think if we all look back, like nothing that we have done has been linear, right? It's this zig and zag and move around. So that I think we want to, and that's where some of like the anxiety comes in for us as moms, women, human beings, is this like wanting to see the clear future, and we can't. So we get very nervous and anxious about what's to come, but maybe just leaning in. And like you said, leaning in to knowing that God is there with you and he will help you on this journey, so that nothing you're doing is wrong. It's an opportunity to learn to make that next step, whether it be straight ahead or off to the side.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you bring up the past though, right? Because for most of us, we have like our teenage selves are like, awesome, you did it. You achieved everything you ever dreamed of in life, right? Like our teenage selves had a vision of what we wanted to do, of what we wanted to accomplish. And we didn't overthink it. Like we just took the next step with trust and faith that it was all going to land the way it was going to. And it's like, now that we've gotten into this phase, we don't know how to dream again, or we're afraid to do it. And like, it's because I think a lot of it is because we've achieved what we always wanted. And now we're at a point in life where it's like, okay, I don't know what I want anymore. And that can be scary. So part of it is like, we have that dream muscle. We got to exercise that, right? If we don't dream, we're going to stay stuck exactly where we are. If we don't try, if we don't put ourselves out there, and then that leads to like living vicariously through our kids and their dreams. And like, I want to challenge moms in middle motherhood to think about pursuing their dreams as the opportunity to be like the most amazing role model for your kids. I mean, our kids look to celebrities and professional athletes as their role models. And yeah, they've achieved really great things, but they're not seeing the path and the work and the struggle and the 2 steps back before the giant leap forward that it took to get there. But as moms, if we follow our dreams and we embrace like the journey part of it, we're showing our kids that you don't just snap your fingers and you get that success, or you reach that dream or that goal. It takes work. So if we work on our dreams and we do it first, we show our kids how to do that. I don't know. That's been a huge motivating factor for me.
Well, and I'm thinking as you're talking through this, like those, my kids will talk about these YouTube people and this and that. And I'm on YouTube and I'm doing the thing and I'm, for my business. And they'll kind of jokingly make comments about like, oh, where are you at today, mom? But they all started somewhere as well. And maybe theirs took off better, whatever. But interesting that you say that because they're seeing what I'm having to do to get very little and that it isn't natural for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, there's no like overnight success. There can be overnight breakthroughs, but
right.
those people had to work to get to whatever it is that they've achieved. And I just think that what better place to do it than in your own household?
Yeah, for sure. You had mentioned something. Oh, for the dreamer, you had mentioned about moms and having that opportunity to dream and how it was with high school. And I think when we were in high school, there was so much ahead of us. So it was fun to dream. I am a person, I'm a dreamer. I do much more dreaming probably than action. But what I notice for myself is I'm getting caught up in that's a great dream, but you now have a limited time. So I think when we're young, we have all this time ahead and so much opportunity. And as we hit middle motherhood, then it is like, okay, we see how fast time goes. And we're seeing that time is limited. And therefore, maybe for some moms, it's hard to decide which way to step because it might be too late.
But I'm going to challenge that thought.
Okay.
Because, 16, let's say 16, I just turned 37. So 20 years, right? That's been 20 years of my life. I'm now at 37. If I live to 77, that's 30 years long. That's 30 years in middle motherhood versus 20 years leading up to this point. So I think we think that we have less time, but in reality, we may have more time in this next phase, in this new phase for dreaming, for pursuing different interests and hobbies and passions. Like we tend to want to wait, I think, until the time is perfect or the idea is perfect. But then we wait and we wait and we wait and we never do. And then you get to the 77-year-old and you're like, I just spent all that time waiting and, kind of wishing it away. And I think that leads to more of the regret. So, time is a really interesting perspective. And you can even look at it now, right? How many women are in this middle motherhood phase of their kids are in school and then their kids are graduating high school and now they're off to college and they're the empty nester and they're waiting till that point to start asking these questions, to start pursuing everything. And by that time, you have more deep-seated beliefs that you're trying to undo. So I appreciate the perspective. I'm going to challenge it a little bit because
no, that's fine.
in reality, I hope I live past 77. So, I at least have, well, that's actually 40 years to 77. So my math was off, but I won't ever say math was my strong suit. But, it's a relative and it's a perspective type issue. I think the big thing is when we were in high school, again, we looked to everybody else. We relied on the shoulds. If you made good grades, you'd get into a good college, you'd get a good degree, you'd have a good job, you'd get married, you'd have kids, all the shoulds of what would make you happy, what would make a fulfilling life. And now there's no blueprint for that. There's no manual that you're in this phase of, well, what do you do now to live that happiness, to feel that fulfillment? And so a lot of what we do in coaching is kind of this life design, really tapping into what do you want? How do you want to live? Let's throw the shoulds out the door because there really is no manual for this phase in life. You get to decide. And I think that's really where the fear comes in. Maybe not so much the time, but just that fear of doing it wrong.
Okay. Well, and I'm thinking also what you had mentioned earlier about maybe feeling a little bit of guilt, like you need to step up and step in to help financially at this point.
Mhm.
And I guess maybe that's where my time, like limited amount of time thinking is, where do I need to move within my career to not feel that guilt and not feel like where I can now be an active participant in helping financially. Because as children, I've got two teen boys and they're both driving, and it's like, cars and insurance. And then you start feeling like, I really need to help. I need to figure out a way. So I don't know if you have an answer. It really wasn't designed to have an answer. It was more just like,
I mean, like, it's interesting because the simple answer is it's analyzing those thoughts. What are we making those thoughts mean? What are you making those thoughts mean? Like, the biggest like life hack and light bulb moment for me was when I learned like our thoughts produce our emotions, which influence the action that we're taking and the result that we get. So if you want something different in life, you got to go start back at your thoughts. You can't necessarily just focus on the behavior, because the behavior doesn't create the sustainability. So we have to really like uproot some of these beliefs and some of these pressures and things that have been embedded in our mind for years, and analyze them and say, do I want to keep this? Do I not want to keep it? If I do want to keep this, what does this look like? How can I hold on to this thought without it wreaking emotional havoc on me? Is there a different perspective we can look at that through? And okay. I mean, mindset is not a fun, like most people are like, I don't need this, like, but I would say I was that person too. I never thought, what would I need a life coach or a mindset coach for? Like, I was always that high achiever person, like just achieved and did everything that everybody said I should be doing. And then I got to this point and I'm like, oh yeah, there's a lot of things that, like, for instance, the pressures of having your kids in all sporting events and select teams. Like, my kids are a little bit younger than yours, but I have a 7-year-old son who plays baseball, and like not succumbing to this being busy. And like my fear and driving that was, if I don't have my kid on a team now, he won't make a team in high school. Like, I'm worrying about things that are really and truly out of my control and upending my life at this point, and worrying about it. And it creates anxiety and overwhelm. And so I really had to challenge that belief. Like, is it true that if we do not play select baseball at 7 years old, he will not make a team in high school? Well, no, there's not truth to that.
Right.
So that changed what was important to me right now. I don't want to give up family dinners. I don't want to be, running around till 9 o'clock at night when my kids are this age. There's a time for it, but I don't want to do that now. And I think that's where, like, we were kind of talking about it, I think, before we started, but just that authenticity. And we were talking about it in being pet owners, right? Like, I know now, and I'm okay with accepting, like, I don't want to be a pet owner. I can go out and tell people I don't really love animals and not feel shame for that, because I know that about myself. But I think oftentimes we, one, don't know things about ourselves, or two, we're too afraid to embrace those things about ourselves.
Yeah. Admit it because of what other people may think.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Becomes really freeing when you stop really like letting what other people think dictate of your life, and like really letting like the path to God dictate what your actions are, right? Like spending more hours at the baseball field instead of sitting around a family dinner with my kids is probably not going to get me to heaven any faster. So I don't know.
Can you give our listeners, like our moms, any tips on where they should? I know we mentioned where you should start, and you said go within. But like, is there a journal prompt or anything that you can think of that tends to help your clients right off the bat?
Yeah, I think really thinking about it's interesting, because when I work with clients, they kind of come in two different paths. Some know really and truly what they want. They have that vision. they know goals that they want to work on. And so we take action towards that. There's some women who come and there's just so much noise in their head that they can't even begin to think about what they would want. And so we have to start with really unraveling that mind drama. So I think a good place to start is awareness is really the first key. So being aware of your thoughts throughout the day, like what are kind of the repetitive thoughts that keep coming up? Mm-hmm. And a really good way to analyze that is to see like, what are kind of some of the bad habits that you have, right? Do you struggle with emotional eating? Do you struggle with kind of like pouring yourself a glass of wine mindlessly at the end of the day? Are you mindlessly scrolling social media or online shopping, right? Those are going to be your triggers, that there's some underlying mind drama that's leading to that. You don't like those habits. So what's leading to that? And those are usually the thoughts that continue to plague you. So that awareness piece is really, really awesome. And where I really like to start with people is I really think doing a life audit and an inventory is huge. And I do that. It's a free session for anybody who wants to do a life audit. They can book that with me. And there's no, like, you don't have to continue with coaching, but if you don't want to, or if it's not the right time, there's no pressure, I guess is what I'm getting at. But in this life audit, it's just really helping you look at these different categories in your life and see, what is working? Like, do you have good habits in this area of life? Is there anything you want to change? Is there any like habit that isn't serving you? And these are like all categories of life, health and wellness, not just career and passion, but like your relationships, your friendships. So we kind of break it down into these different categories and just help give you a snapshot of like, at this point in your life, this is where things stand. And it creates that picture. And then this picture of, if this is where things are, is there anything I want to change? And if so, this is how we move forward with that. These are the changes that you would want to make. So it creates a lot of clarity. Okay. And so I think that's a really good place to start as well. Like I said, it's a free session. I love doing the life audits because it just creates so many aha moments for women and just gives them a place to start. So, yeah.
So can you tell us where we can find you, where we can go for the life audit and all of that information?
Yeah. So I will say the website, but I'm assuming you'll have it in show notes.
Of course. Most definitely.
Yeah. The life audit, it's www.charatracta.com/session. You can book it right there through the Calendly link, and we set it up, and it's an hour long. We just have a conversation kind of like this, like what's going on in life, like mom to mom, like this is where I am and this is what I want to change, or this is what I'm struggling with. And then I also have a free community, the Middle Motherhood community, and that's a longer so I'm not going to try to spell that one out. But it's housed in an app called Mighty Network. So I've taken it off of social media just from personal preferences of wanting to be intentional about doing this work. But within the free community, there's different workshops in there. There's different free trainings. It's where like my podcast goes every week because I'm taking imperfect action and putting a podcast out, but I haven't actually like gone through and started the full launch of a podcast into, where you normally listen to podcasts, but it is available. The weekly show is available on, in the community.
Okay. That's good to know. I didn't know that. So, okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. And is there anything you want to leave moms with today, something that they can do this week to help them in this middle motherhood journey?
I think one, just realizing you're at a really unique opportunity in life. Like I really feel like it's a huge sweet spot, a chance to kind of catch your breath. And I think just know that, in this phase, you have this really cool opportunity to co-create your life with God. And if you don't realize that, and if you don't try to take the next steps or figure out what you're being called for, you're creating something either way. You're either creating something that you really want or you don't want. And so just know that like your story matters. Like what you do in life, how you're serving, who you are matters. Like there was a really unique reason why you were made with certain gifts and certain talents, and try to learn them, try to embrace them, try to know yourself authentically. Because when you do it just like we all get to write a page in God's history book. Our lives are this blank page. And if it's a really, in my opinion, really cool visual to think about, our lives are a part of his history. So what are we doing with them? And when we kind of just stay stuck and stay stagnant in that fear, we're really kind of letting the enemy win over our life. And that's not a really fun place to stay. So just know that you have a choice and that you do get a say in creating what you do next, and embrace it as a really cool opportunity and an adventure to do some really amazing things.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day for this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for taking the time out of your day to listen to our podcast. We hope you found this information valuable and can incorporate it into your family's life. Make sure to check out our show notes for all the important links available. Come join us on Facebook at Moms Raising Healthy Humans community page. Also, please check out our wide range of memberships, family monthly focus ideas, challenges, live events, and on-demand and live workouts, meal plans, and so much more. Head to formfitonline.com. And as always, keep moving.